I stood in our kitchen, wearing clothes from a thrift store, stirring pasta sauce, while my wife Victoria streamed to thousands of people online. She sat on our couch with her new boyfriend, Marcus, hovering nearby like he owned the place. Her phone camera caught every angle of their perfect moment together. I was just the invisible man in the background, the one nobody cared about anymore. Victoria had called a family meeting that morning. I knew what was coming. The lawyer's papers were already sitting on the dining room table, thick as a winter coat. No-fault divorce, custody agreements, and something else, a document asking my children to sign away our relationship. I read the words carefully. They wanted me to agree that I was no longer their father, that Marcus would be their new dad. The sick part? My children, coached like actors in a play, said the words without hesitation. They wouldn't look me in the eye. I signed everything, not because I believed any of it, but because fighting would mean a smear campaign, public humiliation, and pain for the kids. So I signed, and then I smiled once, thin and tired and final. On the last page, I added a clause that only a real lawyer would notice. Something small. Something that would matter later. Then I walked out into the evening, carrying only a dented sedan and a secret. The parking lot was empty under a gray sky. I sat in my old car and pulled out a phone nobody knew I had. This wasn't my family phone. This was the other phone. The one that connected me to everything I had built in secret. I opened an email-marked quarterly report, and my hands moved across the screen like a pianist playing a familiar song. With just a few taps, I authorized a massive payment from a company nobody knew I owned. Then another. Then another. Shells and trusts and holding companies, all connected to me through my sister Lila. I had built an empire over a decade, starting with something I found after my father died. Money. Real money. Bearer bonds in a biscuit tin, rusted and forgotten, locked in his old safe. I had turned that discovery into something enormous. Freight companies, payment systems, content networks, thousands of employees, millions in assets. But I had chosen to live small. I wore cheap clothes and drove this dented car because I didn't want Victoria to feel threatened. I didn't want her to feel less than me. I had even financed her career in secret, moving money behind the scenes to keep her happy. I texted Lila, begin the audit, call it Wintermute. A green light appeared on my screen. Everything was ready. My sister controlled my empire while I pretended to be nobody. But that was about to change. The map on my phone blossomed with assets as far as I could see. I remembered finding the money like it was yesterday. My father had died when I was 25, and the will reading was disappointing. Everything was divided among distant relatives. But then, while cleaning out his old study, I found the lockbox. Inside were bearer bonds, financial instruments, so old they were almost legendary. I brought them to a lawyer I trusted, and within 6 months, I had transformed them into seed capital. I started small, buying struggling freight lanes from companies going under. Then I moved into payment processors, buying systems that other entrepreneurs had abandoned. Finally, I bought a content network that connected creators to distributors. Nobody knew these companies were connected. Nobody knew they were all me. I had hidden behind trusts and legal structures so complicated that even accountants got confused. My contracts were signed by AC Holdings, Infinity Partners, and a dozen other names. Samantha never suspected. She thought I worked in a warehouse, managing inventory for someone else. She laughed at my boring job, while I quietly owned the trucks that delivered her shipments. I owned the payment processor that handled her transactions. I owned half the supply chain that made her business possible. Now sitting in this parking lot, I opened my secret phone and gave a silent order. Freeze the ad network on the boyfriend's clients. The green light blinked, armed. Everything was in place. The trap was set, and nobody even knew it existed. Samantha's brand had always been fragile, though she never realized it. She thought she was self-made, a genius creator who had pulled herself up by her bootstraps. The truth was different. I had been the patron saint of her success, watching from the shadows. When suppliers threatened to cut her off, I opened new lines through front companies. When she needed bridge loans, I arranged them through banks that answered to my holding company. When her ad campaigns struggled, I activated the content network to boost her reach. She kissed Marcus on camera and called him the brains behind her success. She credited her own genius. She never once mentioned the invisible hand that caught her whenever she started to fall. I texted Lila, "Build the kill switch, but hide it in their pride." She replied within seconds with a clause number. I smiled at that. My sister understood. Every contract Samantha had signed with her suppliers included tiny language that most people missed. Disclosure triggers, escrow accounts that could be frozen, rights of review that seemed reasonable until they weren't. We hadn't trapped her. We had handed her the tools to trap herself. She was standing on a bridge made of my money, my systems, my logistics, and she had no idea. Every product she sold, every customer she served, every dollar she earned, it all flowed through channels I controlled. One word for me, and everything would stop. But I wasn't ready to speak that word yet. First, she needed to fall deeper into the trap of believing she had done it all alone. My sister Lila worked in an office I had never visited. She didn't need me there. She was too smart for that. She was the official COO of the holding company, listed in business registers under my legal name, and she ran the entire operation like a conductor leading an orchestra. I knew she was sitting at her desk right now, staring at a triangle she had drawn on a whiteboard. Finance, fulfillment, fame. She had explained it to me once. We control two. We let her think she controls the third. It was perfect. I owned the finance. Every loan, every payment system, every investment opportunity came through me. I owned fulfillment, the freight lines, the warehouses, the logistics networks. But Samantha? She owned fame. She owned the cameras and the followers and the brand. She thought that made her the most powerful one. It didn't. You could have all the fame in the world, but without finance and fulfillment, you were just noise. Lila had access to a file called Gala, mandatory acknowledgement. She locked it with my birthday as the password. Inside that file was everything. Every contract, every signature, every moment where Samantha had benefited from my invisible support. She had also prepared documents that would never be used unless absolutely necessary. But they were there, waiting in the darkness, like weapons stored for a war that hopefully would never come. Lila sent me a message, "Ready when you are." My children's voices came through a phone that wasn't theirs. Marcus had scripted everything, and they had memorized it like a school play. "He's a loser," my son said, his young voice cracking slightly. "We're upgrading," my daughter added, her words hollow and rehearsed. Then they blocked me from their social accounts. I listened to the recording once, and something inside me broke. Not my heart. That had already shattered. It was something deeper. It was the part of me that believed in redemption, that believed people could see past deception to the truth. I saved the audio file with precise timestamps. I archived it in a folder marked proof. Then I sat in my car and whispered, "Keep speaking. Keep recording your own truth." The recording device continued to blink red, capturing every word they didn't understand, every phrase they didn't truly mean. I wasn't recording them to hurt them later. I was recording them because eventually, when all of this was over, they would need to see what they had become. They would need to understand that they hadn't made these choices freely. They had been manipulated, coached, transformed into actors in someone else's play. And when that moment came, and it would come, they would need to know that I had always known the truth. I had always seen them clearly. I filed the recording alongside their severance documents, the ones where they had voluntarily given up any legal claim to being my children. I would keep these recordings safe, not as weapons, but as evidence of the truth. I wrote letters to my children that I never sent. I wrote about the day my son was born, how I had held him in the hospital and cried because the world felt too big and dangerous for such a small person. I wrote about my daughter's first steps, how she had wobbled across our living room floor while I cheered. I had opened a bank account in their names years ago, back when I was still hopeful that Victoria and I would grow old together. $70,000 in each account, waiting for them to turn 18. I had wanted to give them choices. I had wanted them to know that their father loved them enough to plan for their future. Now I sealed these letters and filed them away. Lila had warned me, they'll burn them on camera. They'll use your own words against you. But I didn't care. The letters weren't for Victoria or Marcus or the social media followers. They were for my children, for the moment when they were old enough to understand. I also drafted a second letter. This one was addressed to the board of Samantha's sponsors. I didn't send it yet, but I had it ready. It contained everything. Every transaction, every payment, every moment where I had propped up her empire. When the time came, and I knew it would come, this letter would change everything. Lila's team worked like detectives hunting a criminal. She traced Marcus's management fees through 3 shell companies and a fake charity that didn't exist on any official registers. I bought all 3 shells by morning. Marcus opened his laptop to move more money, and he discovered that the companies he owned weren't his anymore. An email greeted him from a law firm. Welcome to your audit. Please attend with counsel. The firm was neutral, faceless, and absolutely professional. Marcus didn't know it was connected to me. He didn't know that every shell company he had created, I now controlled. He didn't know that I had purchased his entire fraudulent network before his morning coffee got cold. I could feel the panic traveling through the digital world toward him. He would be frightened. He would be confused. And by the time he understood what was happening, it would be too late. His money would be frozen. His schemes would be exposed. And nobody would be able to connect it back to me. That was the beauty of the trap. It wasn't cruel or theatrical. It was just inevitable. Like gravity. Like consequences. Like the natural order of the universe correcting itself. I saved Samantha's business once more, and it cemented her dependence on me, without her even knowing it. A supplier hiccup nearly destroyed her holiday launch. Retailers were pulling out. Her CFO was crying. Then, like magic, a solution appeared. A front company I controlled offered to rescue the situation, absorbing losses to save her inventory. She was printed a public miracle overnight. The media covered the story. Unknown investor saves holiday season. Samantha posted about being self-made or die, while her CFO quietly signed Addendum 17, a clause giving my holding company the right to request disclosure at its sole discretion. She never read the fine print. She never understood what she was signing. She just knew that once again, luck had smiled on her. Once again, the universe had bent in her favor. She didn't know that the universe was me. She didn't know that I had orchestrated every miracle, every rescue, every impossible save. Each time I had saved her, I had woven the rope a little tighter. Each time she had posted about her success, she had deepened her own trap. I was patient. I could wait. The gala was still months away, and everything needed to be perfect when the curtain rose. Maya was different from everyone else in Samantha's family. She was the younger sister, quiet and observant, and she saw things that others missed. She brought me stew in a plain thermos one evening, setting it down on my kitchen counter without fanfare or pity. Her eyes were steady and kind. I warned them, she said simply. I told them they were making a mistake. They wouldn't listen. I asked her only one question. Will you be there when the lights change? She nodded once, just once, and it meant everything. Then she slipped a folded napkin onto my counter. Inside was the date of the gala and a seating chart. She knew something was coming. She didn't know the details, but she understood that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't finished, that there was a plan in motion. Maya left without asking for anything in return. She didn't want my money or my gratitude. She just wanted the truth to come out. She wanted people to see clearly. We didn't talk about what would happen next, but we didn't need to. We understood each other with a kind of understanding that doesn't require words. I instructed Lila to purchase the gala venue through a blind trust that couldn't be traced back to me. The sound system, the lights, the massive screens that would line the walls, I owned all of it. I bought the media outlet that had teased a tell-all story about Marcus and flipped the narrative completely. Suddenly, the story became about embezzlement instead of exposure. An anonymous investor had saved jobs and protected innocent employees. That investor was me, but nobody would ever know. Samantha doubled down on her plans. She announced a historic reveal at the gala, a moment that would change everything. She promised revelations. She promised truth. She had no idea that she was walking directly into the trap. The gala was becoming an elaborate stage, and every element of it was under my control. The venue, the cameras, the narrative. I had designed it all like an architect designing a cathedral. And at the center of it all, at the moment when everyone was watching and listening and believing, I would reveal who I really was. Marcus came to the audit in a designer suit that probably cost more than my car. He left without a phone, without access to his accounts, and without credibility. The audit had been devastating. Numbers didn't lie. Documents didn't lie. His schemes were exposed in excruciating detail. He tried to threaten Samantha, "Name me, and I'll name you." So Samantha signed an NDA without reading it. The document seemed reasonable enough, a standard agreement protecting them both. But hidden in the language was a clause that granted my holding company the right to air any material evidence at any event that my company sponsored. Samantha had just signed away her protection. She had handed me the right to broadcast her sins at the gala. She had done it without understanding what she was signing, just like she always did. Just like she had done 100 times before. My lawyers were excellent at burying important clauses in plain sight, right next to harmless ones. By the time someone realized what they had agreed to, it was always too late. A live stream appeared on social media. My children were on camera, giddy and excited, announcing that they would introduce their real dad at the gala. They were talking about Marcus. They were practicing how they would walk out on stage and hug him while cameras flashed. I watched the video in a parked car, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, my breath steady and controlled. Every word they spoke was being recorded. Every moment was being documented. Lila forwarded the clip to legal with a simple subject line: "Consent received." I didn't reply to anyone. There was nothing to say. My children had just given me permission to broadcast their betrayal. They had recorded their own evidence. They had created their own documentation of how they had been manipulated. The universe had a strange sense of justice. It gave people exactly what they asked for, even when they didn't understand what they were asking. Samantha visited my apartment one afternoon. She walked in without calling first, a habit from when she was my wife, and this place was still our home. She was wearing expensive clothes and carrying a designer purse. She placed the severance documents on my table, the ones where our children had signed away their relationship with me. She placed them down like trophies. "You are always nothing," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You will always be nothing." I offered her tea. She refused and left, never noticing the tiny camera recording everything from the corner of the room. Her words were preserved in high definition. Her threats were captured with crystal clarity. The contempt in her voice was digitized and filed. I saved the footage under a folder marked voluntary statements, uncoerced. She had spoken freely. She had meant every word. And now I had proof. I saved Samantha's business one final time, and I made sure she knew something was happening. Inventory stalled at sea. Retailers were panicking. She wept on her live stream, begging for help from whoever was helping her. I opened every freight lane I controlled. I paid every port fee. I tripled the warehousing capacity. I saved the launch again, just like I had done a dozen times before. My angel investor, she whispered to her reflection. Her CFO sent an email. Angel requests 5 minutes on stage at the gala, unedited. Samantha typed back immediately, agreed. She didn't know that the angel investor was me. She didn't know that the gala was my gala. She didn't know that every screen, every microphone, every camera had been waiting for this moment. She had just agreed to give me the platform I needed. She had invited me to speak. She had written my permission slip, and now nobody could accuse me of crashing her party. Maya came back with a brown paper bag and a warning. "Don't salt the earth," she said, her voice serious. "Build something beautiful after." She was asking me not to destroy everything, not to burn it all down, to create instead of merely destroy. I showed her something I had never shown anyone. An empty ring box. "I'm not proposing to a crown," I told her quietly. "I'm proposing to a person who actually sees me." Maya blushed deeply and left. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. She left me with something more valuable than a yes. She left me with possibility. Later that evening, I received a text from Samantha. "Stay away from Adrian or you're out of the family." That was how she referred to me now. Adrian. Like I was a stranger. Like I had never been her husband. Like I had never held her when she was afraid. The text was clearly directed at Maya. Samantha was drawing lines, declaring war, establishing loyalty tests. She was making it clear that you were either with her or against her. There was no middle ground. There was no mercy. Lila rehearsed the reveal like it was a military operation. She had organized everything with precision and care. A timeline of contracts, invoices, payrolls I had saved, IP clauses hidden in the fine print. And then there was the children's severance, the documents where they had voluntarily signed away their relationship with their father. Lila prepared slides showing how their investments had been managed, how I had placed money in trust for them, hoping they would use it someday to build something good. But there was one more slide, and it made me angry. It was a trust instrument moving those investments into a foundation for orphans. The foundation would receive the money only if the kids ever chose to meet me as adults and apologize. I crossed out that condition immediately. "No strings," I told Lila firmly. "They severed me. I won't sever them back." Lila looked confused. "But they betrayed you." "I know," I said. "And I'll give them that money anyway. Because that's who I am. I'm someone who gives even when people don't deserve it. I'm someone who loves without conditions." At a notary's desk, I signed a will that would change everything. The document was formal and legal and absolutely final. Samantha would receive nothing. The children would receive nothing from the corporate stack. Everything I had built, every company, every investment, every asset, would go to the Orphans Lantern Foundation, effective immediately. The children would not inherit a penny of my empire. They would not get to claim they were victims after the fact. They would not get to say they didn't know. The message was clear. I had loved you more than I loved my own fortune. And when you threw me away, I gave my fortune to children who actually needed help. I gave it to kids whose parents had abandoned them, just like you abandoned me. The document was signed and notarized and filed. It was irrevocable. It was final. It was mercy served cold. The gala hall was transformed into something that looked like a cathedral made of black and gold. I owned the building. I owned the broadcast rights. I owned the NDA that had granted me 5 minutes on stage, unedited. Samantha swept in wearing a cape embroidered with her initials, treating it like she was royalty. Backstage, my children practiced a speech about forgiveness. They had been coached to say certain phrases and avoid others. They had been instructed never to say my name. Backstage, Lila locked the control booth and killed the wireless microphones that weren't on her approved list. Everything was ready. We had planned this moment for months. Every detail had been orchestrated. Every element was in place. The trap was perfect. And now we were ready to spring it. Samantha started with tears and triumph. She talked about how hard she had worked. How she had built everything through sheer will and determination. The MC thanked an invisible benefactor, me, though nobody knew it yet. The massive screens lit up with a clean, brutal montage. Freight lanes opened. Payrolls saved. Contracts signed in my careful handwriting. The montage was a timeline of my support, presented without emotion, but impossible to deny. It froze on a door. The door opened. I walked out in a tailored suit that I had never worn before. A suit that cost more than my dented car. I owned the room the moment I appeared. The silence was absolute. It hummed like electricity. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady and clear. My name is Adrian Cole. I thanked the staff I had been paying for years. I thanked the partners I had protected. I thanked Lila, and she stepped forward, removed her badge, and announced herself to the entire world. Chief Operating Officer, Cole Meridian Holdings. The lower third of the broadcast named her. The camera found her in the crowd. Everything became real in that moment. This wasn't a hidden operation anymore. This was public. This was known. I was Adrian Cole. I owned this moment. I owned this night. And everything that came next was irreversible. The screens rolled the severance document. My children's signatures. Their rehearsed chant played through speakers that I controlled. He's a loser. We're upgrading. Then Samantha's visit to my apartment played in high definition. Her words were absolutely clear. You were always nothing. You will always be nothing. The audience recoiled. You could feel the shift in the room, like a physical force changing direction. I spoke calmly. You chose a world without me. I honored your choice. The honesty in those words cut deeper than any anger would have. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was simply stating facts. I was simply telling the truth. The power in those moments came not from passion, but from absolute clarity. I announced the Orphans Lantern Foundation and executed the deed of gift. Every investment I had made in my children's names was moving to that foundation. They didn't get anything. No scholarship funds. No trusts. No inheritance. At exactly 9 o'clock, the payment processor, which I owned, suspended Samantha's brand accounts, pending verification under Clause 17. The clause she had signed without reading. The clause that gave me total authority. Her entire empire froze instantly. No payments. No transactions. No movement. Everything stopped. Sponsors withdrew the moment they understood what had happened. Retailers refused unverified inventory. The supply chain collapsed immediately. Samantha begged to speak, but her microphone was dead. The kids stared at the scholarship names listed under the foundation and realized that their lives were memorialized by someone they had erased. Marcus tried to rush the stage, but his pass had been revoked an hour ago. The boyfriend she had chosen was blocked from the building. The boyfriend she had positioned as their real father couldn't even get through the door. He was nobody at the moment that mattered most. I took Maya's hand as she stood at the foot of the stage. You were the only one who spoke to me as if I mattered, I said. Build a life with me? She said yes. Not because I had an empire. Not because I was powerful or successful. She said yes because I had chosen restraint when I could have chosen cruelty. She said yes because I had been honest about pain instead of hiding it. Cameras exploded. The world recalibrated. We walked into the lights together, and I left my old life behind. As we walked, Lila powered down the room. Samantha's kingdom went black. Adrian Cole's new life was beginning. I had lost a family that was never really mine. And I had found something worth so much more, the truth about who I really was.